Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin's conversation completely altered Volodymyr Zelensky's Washington visit plans. In fact, Zelensky's visit to the White House turned into a trap. Earlier, it was reported that the topic of supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine would be discussed at the meeting between Trump and Zelensky. But Trump's unexpected announcement of a new summit with Vladimir Putin in Budapest overshadowed these plans. Moreover, one of the members of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, who is participating in negotiations with the Americans, directly stated that the topic of Tomahawks is now on hold. Moreover, United States Vice President J.D. Vance directly stated today that Ukraine and Russia are not ready for a peace agreement. And let me remind you here that the first meeting between Trump and Putin, which took place in Alaska in August, did not bring any breakthrough. However, the American president has once again taken up mediation, despite analysts' warnings that this could only strengthen the Kremlin's position. And now it's absolutely unclear what Zelensky should talk about with Donald Trump. And by the way, the White House has already presented the American president's schedule for the day. And there's no big meeting with Zelensky planned in the Oval Office, just an informal lunch. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is October 17th. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write any detailed comment under this episode. And I recommend subscribing to my Telegram channel Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support the channel Alexei Pechi. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support from you. Tonight, Zelensky and Donald Trump will meet at the White House. And this meeting could become a test of trust. Because Zelensky is asking for missiles and Trump is preparing to make a deal with Putin, who is stalling for time again. Both leaders were expected to discuss Tomahawk deliveries. Previously, the White House confirmed that Zelensky is flying to Washington. Because there are issues that shouldn't be discussed over the phone. Trump's surprise announcement of a new meeting with Vladimir Putin in Budapest, of course, overshadowed these plans. On Thursday, Trump said he might meet with the Russian president within the next 2 weeks in Budapest after a 2-hour phone conversation, which he called productive. As he stated, all my life I have been making deals and I think we will make this agreement too. The United States president pledged Friday to update Zelensky on talks with the Kremlin. However, his conciliatory tone with Putin has raised concerns in Europe that Washington might make concessions to Moscow, at the very least delaying the delivery of important weapons to Ukraine. And now it increasingly looks like Trump is backing down and will try to make some kind of deal again. Yesterday, Trump said, quote, "They have a problem. They don't get along with each other." He was referring to Zelensky and Putin. "That's why it's very difficult to arrange meetings, so I think we'll do something separately, but it will be equivalent. We'll meet and talk with both sides." Well, and here's what comes next. Trump claims that the meeting in Alaska was not a failure. He says it supposedly laid the groundwork for future negotiations. Well, then the question arises, why did Trump himself say that Putin doesn't want to end the war? Nevertheless, I'll quote him. "I think Alaska laid the groundwork. It wasn't that long ago, but it laid the groundwork. You have to understand, it just so happened that I ended up in this situation. I didn't start this war, this is Biden's doing, and I ended up in it. This could have led to World War III. It all started because of very bad decisions. I'm not doing this for us, but to save souls and help Europe. There's an ocean between us. They want this to end, but they can't make it happen." But that's it, that's all. Many analysts believe that the Kremlin is trying to repeat its stalling tactics and Putin is once again seeking to delay the transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That's classic delayed diplomacy. Of course, the Tomahawk won't break Russia with a single strike, but it creates constant pressure and will definitely damage its military-industrial complex. Putin doesn't want that, despite claiming this weapon isn't special. Zelensky replied to Trump, stressing that the Kremlin responds only to genuine threats. Yesterday, United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth made a strong statement saying Putin will only respect and fear strength and must be shown it. Pete Hegseth insisted it's time to stop talking and finally act with force. But just a day later, all that rhetoric disappeared. And after talking with Putin, Trump stated that the United States cannot deplete its own missile stockpiles, hinting at a possible reduction in military aid to Ukraine. Quote, "We need them to. We can't give away all our Tomahawks." European allies are now concerned that the new Trump-Putin summit in Budapest could repeat the Alaska scenario. Loud statements without results, but with benefits for the Kremlin. And now what I have repeatedly talked about on this YouTube channel is happening. Putin has offered Trump a very long road to personal negotiations. The Russians' delaying tactics are all about promising something and then spending months preparing for it. Well, remember when Putin, for example, back in May said, listen, stop, we don't need a ceasefire for a month, let's meet right away, I'll meet with Volodymyr Zelensky somewhere in Turkey, let's schedule a meeting, everyone meets, sits down and talks. He didn't come himself, he sent someone like Mudinsky instead. That's when things started to unfold for us. Negotiations go through stages with different advisory groups leading at each phase, continuing up to the 15th group. And in this way, the Russians say, well, listen, for Putin to meet with Zelensky, this meeting needs to be prepared, and for that, 1 million consultations are needed. Today, Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, said a meeting between Putin and Trump could happen in 2 weeks or later. He said the meeting will be prepared in stages because many issues need resolving. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio will begin addressing them. Next is a quote from Peskov. First, they will have a phone call and meet. They will start discussing all the issues. There are many issues, teams need to be determined, and so on. So everything will happen step by step. So does that mean the Russians really got Trump hooked on this? Now they can spend months choosing delegation members, listing issues, making calls and coordinating, and so on. And this can go on forever. And the previous 9 months of Trump's presidency have already proven that. Russia is stalling. And also Peskov stated that the detailed content of the conversation between Putin and Trump should remain outside the media. At the same time, he emphasized that Putin explained Russia's position on the Tomahawks to Trump as clearly as possible. So, here's the question. In this context, how does Trump look? Like a coward who was afraid of Putin. Even if Putin and Trump meet again, nothing will change. Trump's first meeting with Putin in Alaska in August produced no breakthrough. However, the American president is at it again, trying to mediate even though everyone warns him that this will strengthen the Kremlin's position. Many here hope that the growing disappointment of the American leader with Putin's behavior will now force the White House to increase pressure on Moscow, specifically by providing weapons to Ukraine and imposing energy sanctions on Moscow. Analysts here warn that Trump will likely opt for the carrot over the stick. And Trump has already stated that he discussed post-war trade opportunities with Putin. But on the other hand, it's important to remember that a second meeting with Putin without any pressure could be a reckless move. Well, and Trump's team should understand that. But Trump is choosing to apply indirect pressure here not on Russia but on Ukraine. He is delaying the delivery of critically important weapons and postponing the introduction of energy sanctions against Russia, which he himself promised. And as Axios reports today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his team were surprised by United States President Donald Trump's statement about an agreement with Putin to hold a new meeting in Hungary. According to the publication, the Ukrainian leader, who arrived in Washington on Thursday, has shown cautious optimism in recent days. On the eve of his meeting with Trump, Kyiv hoped that the White House would agree to provide Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles. However, shortly after Zelensky landed at Andrews Air Force Base, it became known that Trump had already spoken with Putin and agreed to meet him in Budapest. And by the way, there's a bit too much symbolism here. Trump, who has long considered Orban an ally of the Make America Great Again movement, may see Budapest as friendly territory for talks with Putin. But for the West, this is still a warning sign. A summit in the capital of a country blocking Ukraine's support appears like a concession to Moscow. Putin, as a result, can signal to the world that he's in control of the situation. And here we are on the eve of the meeting between Trump and Zelensky. Yegor Chenev, Verkhovna Rada member and deputy head of the Defense and Intelligence Committee, says the transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine is currently on hold. He noted that other areas of cooperation are still being discussed, in particular the supply of air defense systems and missiles, as well as the development of the Build with Ukraine initiative for joint weapons production with American companies. Well, according to Chernev, after yesterday's call between Putin and Trump, expectations for their upcoming meeting have changed and some points may be reconsidered. What should Trump and Zelensky discuss now that the Tomahawk issue has been postponed after Trump's talk with Putin? Well, maybe Trump will insist again that Zelensky meet with Putin to make a deal. But it's strange here too. First of all, Zelensky doesn't mind, it follows. And today, his head of the presidential office, Yermak, said that Zelensky is ready to meet with the balding dictator Putin at any moment. But not in Russia and not in Belarus. Today, United States Vice President J.D. Vance said Ukraine and Russia are not prepared for direct talks or a peace agreement. So what is the conversation between Trump and Zelensky about today then? Well, the answer turned out to be obvious. The White House says Zelensky and Trump will meet over an informal lunch, close to the press, not in the Oval Office. The number of topics for discussion has dropped sharply, but that doesn't mean all is lost. Now start blaming yourself for it. Surely the White House must realize that Putin is only stalling for time. And here I'll give a spoiler for the next episode on this YouTube channel. United States Vice President J.D. Vance said today, quote, "Russians very often overestimate their successes on the battlefield, and that's exactly what makes it harder to reach an agreement to end the war." I'll leave it at that for now. Share your thoughts and conclusions in the comments. Write your expectations for the Zelensky-Trump meeting. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like the channel. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.